Okay, on to our next talk. Is in the room here we have Niamh Brereton, who is currently doing her PhD at the University of Birmingham. Niamh gave a talk earlier in the year via Zoom at our first year in maths workshop. And so we're delighted to have Niamh come all the way out to Australia. She spent last week in Sydney talking to a bunch of first year in maths and Delta people, and is hanging around next week to talk to some Brisbane people as well. And she's also got her poster up in the tea room. So please have a look at that and have a chat to Niamh. So welcome, Niamh, to your first Delta.
Hello. Is that on? Hello. Yep. I guess I'll just try and talk loudly. Okay, cool. Yep. Is it just, do I have to click? You might have to click. Yeah, perfect, cool. All right. Hello, everybody. I wasn't expecting Michael to do that introduction, so I had planned to say exactly that. So yeah, I'm a PhD student at the University of Birmingham from the UK. And my supervisor is Michael Grove. So all work I'm describing is joint work with him, of course. And I do want to acknowledge the reason I'm able to be here is because I've been able to get some really generous funding, and I'm really, really grateful and excited to be all the way in Australia. It's like very, very cool. So yeah. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my PhD work. So my PhD is currently going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to be talking about the second part, but I will also give an overview of the first and third part as well. So I'm going to start with some background, methodology, results and discussion, and further work. The study that I'm talking about today is interviews with students. Okay, so a little bit of background. In the first part of my PhD work, we sent out a UK-wide survey to mathematics departments, and we wanted to explore the challenges that they thought students faced at the transition to studying maths at university. So this is specifically specialist maths students, so that's students majoring in maths or doing a single honours course in mathematics. The results of that are what my poster is on. So if you're interested, do come and chat. I'm going to be referencing back to the findings in this study quite a lot to sort of cross-correlate what we found in this part. And we also explored in this study what departments were actually doing to support students at the transition as well. Okay, in terms of student perspectives, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, previous work has explored graduate perspectives. So when students have left university 3 years onwards, reflecting back how they felt about their experience. And some studies have looked at if students engage with certain learning opportunities. Here, we're talking to students who are currently pursuing their maths course, so how they feel in the moment, what they're actually doing with their time, what they're finding difficult, what they think is really good. And hopefully, the results might be able to inform interventions and changes, again, so we can cross-correlate what staff think versus what students think, see where they sort of align, what they agree with, and what is maybe a mismatch in expectations. Okay, so the research questions for this study were, what are students' experiences of studying maths at university? And how are students engaging with their maths course? So all I'm going to say is that the data analysis for this is still in it's still being analysed because I've got a lot of data. So I am going to present some provisional results. I'm going to present what's really, really stood out, and I know for a fact lots of people spoke about, to give you an idea, but there's so much data and it would be impossible, even if I had done it, to present it in a short amount of time. So the methodology for it. I conducted semi-structured interviews with specialist maths students across all years. They typically range between 30 and 50 minutes, but a lot of them were on the longer side. And I've conducted 42 interviews. I got 15 first years, 15 second years, and 12 third years, which was really annoying because I wanted 15 third years as well. But because of the time of year, I only managed to get 12. But anyway, nonetheless, I am grateful for all of the students who participated. They were really great. Um, Obviously, there's always a problem with like selection bias when you're doing something like interviews. But I really tried to emphasize when I was recruiting that I wanted everybody. It didn't matter if you didn't turn up to any lectures. I want to hear from everybody. And I was quite pleased with the range of responses I got. I've got someone who failed and was retaking the year, all the way up to the person who'd got top grades in the year 2 years running. It goes without saying, but ethical approval was granted for this project and followed throughout. Students were encouraged to be honest, and they were told that nothing they say can get them in any trouble. And we want to make the experience better, so please be as honest as possible, and you will be anonymous all throughout. They were not asked any personal questions at all, but they were told that if they wanted to volunteer up information, that was welcome. So any personal information that you see, students chose to talk about, and they were aware of that and where the findings would be going afterwards. And then we've performed an initial thematic analysis on the responses. Okay, so into the results. I'm going to talk about 3 things. So the first one is teaching and learning experience. The second one is feedback. And the third is the importance of community and friendships. So firstly, learning experience. Students reported struggling with time management and keeping up with the course. This is something that staff recognised as well when we asked them in the survey. Perhaps unsurprising, but I should also say lots of these findings, I've got a lot of student quotes in here because I wanted to present the results through the voice of the student. There is a lot of them, I apologise, but I thought it would be interesting. So yes, I remember that being such a shock. I had no idea how to keep up. And this struggle was not exclusive to first years by any means. In fact, all year groups discuss this to quite a large extent. And this is a third year saying, I still feel now I'm always running behind on the content. And when we surveyed staff and we asked departments what they do to help students, only 7 out of the 30 departments reported actively training students in learning to learn. So this might have been through zero study modules, or it might have been in tutorials where tutors discuss with their first years how best to organise their time, how to manage their deadlines, stuff like that. But only 7 universities reported having any sort of initiative that did this kind of thing, which kind of indicates that there's maybe a mismatch. You know, students are coming in and they're thrown in at the deep end, they don't know how to cope. Staff also see that they're not being able to cope, but there isn't really any training going from heavily assisted learning in school to the independent study at university. And quite a few second years actually expressed that they would have liked more guidance on what was expected of them in first year. Students sort of went further. They didn't just say that they struggled with time management and stuff. They sort of described the effect that that then had on their experience. So the first one is knocked confidence. When I did go to lectures, I wouldn't understand anything that was going on because I was behind. I ended up getting really, really unconfident in the modules. And this one makes me really sad. This is a third year. I don't think I'm good at maths anymore. I've lost a lot of passion I've had for the subject because I've been struggling so much. Yeah. They also spoke about how this led them to disengage with further learning opportunities. So if you're behind and you attend as a lecture, you don't know what's going on, so you feel you're wasting your time. And also, third years focused on the difficulty of job searching alongside managing their learning. So, you know, somebody said, I've got an interview next week, and then I've got an assessment day in 2 weeks. I've got to prepare for those while doing my dissertation on top of all the other deadlines. And I think one thing that sort of stood out to me here was first years come in, they don't know what they're doing. They're really just finding their feet and struggling. And in second year, they sort of just about figure out what's going on. And then in third year, it's sort of back to square one because they've got they've got to think about their future, they've got dissertations and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. Next thing I want to talk about, in the staff survey that we did before, staff noted that students struggle with pure maths, proof, abstraction, writing mathematics, etc. This is well documented in the literature, but it is still an ongoing problem. And there was evidence that this wasn't only something experienced by first years, but this just persisted throughout the years. So this is a second year quote. So one of the scariest modules for me was real analysis, and even up until now, I don't feel I get into that much of a great understanding of it. And further, there's evidence that students in third year are then just using avoidance as a coping strategy with these difficulties. So they're not coming in struggling with it, then sort of overcoming that and then feeling really confident. They're just avoiding it. And obviously, I've just grossly generalized there, but I do think that this is something that as academics we do see probably more than we would like to. So I hate these are third year quotes now. I hate writing proofs. I never do proofs when I'm doing a formative. And I hate proofs. I will actually just avoid even revising them, because if there's a proof question in an exam, I'll either somehow magically answer it or I'll just miss it out. Okay, the next thing I'm going to talk about is feedback. So perhaps unsurprisingly, most students reported not using feedback beyond checking their grade. They were quite brutal about this, actually. I asked them what they did with feedback and they were like, nothing. So yeah, here we go. So I'd look at the mark and I wouldn't really look at the comments. I'm happy enough with the mark that I don't really care. I didn't understand the feedback. I like this. I didn't understand the feedback. I didn't do anything about it. I just sort of ignored it. And in our survey, lots of members of staff also reported this as an issue. They said that students don't read feedback, we're not sure what to do. And feedback in the mathematical sciences particularly typically scores low on the NSS. That's our national student survey that is given every year to final year students about their experience. And feedback's always something that scores low, especially for maths. Suggests a mismatch in expectations for feedback. We spend a lot of money and time marking work. And if students aren't even looking at it, it's sort of like, you know, this is not an effective use of anyone's time. The reason they didn't engage with feedback is it was cited as unhelpful, inconsistent, or irrelevant. So the previous problem sheet doesn't relate to what we're doing now. It's not always clear what you've done wrong. However, quite a few students said that there was exceptions for more interactive feedback. So one student said the MATLAB sessions in first year, so that's our coding module, the lecturer put out loads of feedback, videos and stuff, so I used them quite a bit. Somebody else said the most useful was in MMPS while we were doing it and discussing ideas with either the lecturer or the PGTAs. So MMPS is mathematical modelling and problem solving. It's a first year problem-based active learning module. It's group work. They have a PGTA, which is a postgraduate teaching assistant, helping them and guiding them throughout. And we got lots of positive feedback about that. So somebody said the research project, that's their third year dissertation. That's probably the first time I've taken on feedback. Okay, a bit about the teaching experience. So many students reported struggling adapting to the different nature of university teaching and learning. In particular, lots of students said they really struggled knowing how to use lectures effectively. So we've got some quotes. I switch off to what they're saying because I'm just focusing on copying stuff down. I don't feel like I'm learning anything that way. Students said they were surprised by how independent they were expected to be. So you can't go to lectures, do the exam. There's a lot of extra work you have to do outside, which I didn't expect. And I think for us, this is an obvious thing for us. We know that, but do we tell students when they come in that they're expected to be independent? Because when I spoke to staff and departments, a lot of them just said, oh, well, like, of course we do. But they didn't actually set that expectation, which sounds, it sounds kind of obvious, but I guess sometimes people do just need to be told that you are expected to put in X amount of time, and a bit like earlier when the second year students said that they would have liked more guidance on what was actually expected of them. And lots of students said they struggled with the pace of teaching. This was something that really, really came out. So I wasn't expecting it to be the way it is. It's so fast paced. The students have been critical of the teaching at university in the past. It's documented in the literature. And students kind of went further and detailed the effect that struggling with the teaching methods had on their experience. So I think the thing I found hardest in first year was the way lectures were presented. There's such a difference between lectures and lessons. If you can't understand the first 5 minutes, you won't be able to understand the rest of it because it's all a continuation. In our staff survey, some staff did highlight that they thought students struggled with the teaching methods, in particular lectures. However, there were also a lot of departments that said they thought students adapted to lectures well. You know, they turn up, they do their work, they're clearly doing well. Obviously, for some students, they are able to adapt and they find this fine. So, you know, somebody said it takes a while, but once you're adjusted, you get the hang of it. But for others, lectures were quite simply just seen as a waste of time, and therefore they just didn't turn up. So what they're doing is reciting lecture notes, and I can just read the lecture notes. So they're not seeing value in actually going to the sessions. For others, one student used the MSc, which is the Math Support Centre, as a replacement for lectures. So our Math Support Centre is a centralised support. It's meant for students from any subject to be able to come and get help with the mathematical components on their course. Math students can use it, but it shouldn't be used as a replacement for lectures. We shouldn't be replacing the teaching that is supposed to be on the course. But because students aren't necessarily seeing the value in lectures, they're finding other ways to get their information and get their support. Some students offered suggestions. I had quite a few people say that they'd like to have problems embedded into the lectures, and they quite liked that format of learning. One thing that really, really came out a lot more than maybe I expected to in these interviews was the importance of community and friendship. It's something that lots of people spoke about, and they spoke about it a lot. So lots of students spoke about the positive impact of friendship. So a lot of the enjoyment I've gotten from this course is from discussing problems with people. I've got a group of mates doing maths. I'd find it really difficult if I didn't have that. And this sort of extended to needing friends in order to attend learning opportunities. So I wouldn't go to the guided studies if I had to sit on my own. And half of the third years reported picking at least one module just because their friends were doing it. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing. Like, you're allowed to do things because, you know, your friends are doing it. But I think that when you've got students who maybe would like to do something, but they don't have the confidence to do it, and they don't feel supported, and they're not sure how to manage properly, doing something just because their friends are doing it, because they'll have somebody that they can ask questions with and work with, perhaps that's not really what we want. We want students there to be there to support each other, but we don't want complete dependence on another student. It's also a lot of pressure for the student that is being depended on as well. And we had some students who completely attributed their success to the course just because of their friends. So my friend, he'd basically tutor me. I think one of the only reasons I passed was because of him, because I wasn't getting help elsewhere. And some recent literature from Lara Alcock found that students do primarily stick with other students on their programme. So math students will stick with math students, maths and philosophy students will stick with maths and philosophy students. And so this kind of highlights the importance that if this is really, really important to a student experience, departments should be helping to facilitate people to meet others on their course. This is particularly important for commuting students or students with disabilities. So I had some people say I had no friends. It was so difficult to meet anyone from uni because I live at home. I didn't have flatmates because they weren't in the university accommodation, so I didn't know anybody from uni. And they spoke about how that really had an effect on them until they finally met friends in third year where their experience changed. And somebody else said, again, really quite sad, I came here wanting to make a load of friends. I'm currently in the process of being diagnosed with autism, but either way, I find it difficult to connect with people. And I think that I've heard some members of staff say that they've got student societies, right? Their math society, the students organise things amongst themselves and like that's how they make friends. But I guess my argument would be it shouldn't be up to just the students to organise meeting other students, especially when math societies can often focus on clubbing and drinking, and they can be exclusionary for people, either commuting students or students with disabilities who might want something a little bit more low-key or maybe something a little bit more official, where they're told to come along and it's facilitated by staff. And actually in our survey earlier on, only half of departments reported encouraging a sense of community, so either through social events or departmental schemes in order to get people to meet others on their course. So I guess this is potentially an area of improvement to try and organise events to get people to meet each other. And yeah, quote from a student, so I think more opportunities for math students to meet each other would be better. Okay, I'm just about on time, so I'll very briefly talk about some further work. So obvious one is further analysis of the interview data. This needs to be completed. It's a lot of work. I'm really pleased with the amount of data I've got, but I think I didn't realise how much work 42 nearly hour-long interviews were before I started. We've got ethical approval to look at the students' results who we spoke to. So we're going to have a look at whether their learning strategies and their experience sort of correlates in any way to the results that they're getting. I also want to do a little bit of work on math support. So at Birmingham, a lot of the math students in our course do go to the math support centre. But as I mentioned earlier, there is sort of evidence that they're not turning up to their departmental learning opportunities. That's collector data that is published from my supervisor, but also in these interviews as well. This might not be a phenomenon seen everywhere, but I guess the fact that they're not engaging in departmental opportunities is probably something that is seen in a lot of other places. So I kind of want to look at math support and see, well, what is it about math support that students like so much? Is there things that we can learn, that we can implement into mainstream teaching to enhance the learning experience? I think I've forgotten to put the slide on. Hang on. Yeah, okay. I would like to talk to anyone working in math support. If you are interested in talking to me about, I want to look at the level of communication between those working in math support and those working like in maths departments. If you work in math support and you'd be interested, there's a QR code on my poster to express interest, or you can come and talk to me. I would also like to see whether the challenges that we found from staff in the first bit of my project, whether those challenges are seen internationally. So again, if you work in a maths department and you have an overview of first year curriculum and you've had experience teaching and you would be interested in doing an interview with me, again, either scan the QR code on my poster or come and talk to me. I think that's everything. So here are a few of my references, and thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Niamh. I have about 100 questions, but I'll hold those for later. Maybe we are running slightly behind, so if anyone online has a quick question, we could maybe take that, and those of us that are here live can bombard Niamh with questions over morning tea and lunch. Anyone online?
But yeah, no, if anyone does have questions, I'll be happy to talk. I don't want to interrupt morning tea too much.
So coming in on the chat.
Yes.
Okay, well, if there's no questions online, let's thank Niamh again. Morning tea's in the usual room. Michael's headed off to set that up, which is why you're stuck with me. Once again, let's thank Niamh.